gentlemen, I am joined today by the great Dave Barclay. Dave, thank you for joining me on Yo, That's My Jawn.
Very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me along.
I am so excited to have this conversation, mostly because, you look through your resume and it's literally like just glancing through my entire life because it's like all of my favorite things from when I was little to even now when I'm an adult. So super, super stoked to be able to chat. So I always like to start things off in kind of the Wayback Machine, so to speak. Tell me a little bit about growing up.
Right. Okay. Well, I grew up in London, England, as you can probably tell by my accent. Although I've been in California 25 years, I don't think I've really lost much of my British accent. But so I grew up in London, England. My parents originally were actors. They met at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, RADA, in London in the mid-50s. But when I came along, they decided they wanted a hobby and they wanted to work together, because typically they were cast separately as actors usually are. They wanted to work together, so they started up a puppet company when I was very young, and it exploded and it just snowballed, and they became professional puppeteers for the rest of their lives till the time they retired. And so I grew up with my parents making the puppets, writing the scripts, rehearsing the plays, working out bits of business. And then I would travel with them to all the shows that they did. Before I went to school, I had to stay with them because they didn't have like babysitters. So I got to go and be part of the show as a very young child before I started school. And then during summer holidays and everything, I'd always go with them and be part of the show. So puppetry, and so this is like more like Punch and Judy glove puppetry with the style that my parents used. So I grew up with that. Although I loved the string puppets, I had my own collection of string puppets, and I would, as for their show, they would put an old LP on a battery-operated turntable with a little speaker and put their microphone system to it. And they'd use that as a warm-up, so people would come towards the shows when we were doing the outside, like the Royal Parks in London and that sort of thing. And during that warm-up time, I would go out and dance my marionettes as their warm-up act. So, yeah, it was an amazing creative childhood that basically put me on the path that I'm on today.
That's incredible. Like, was there ever any rejection to it, or were you always just on board with it? Like, was there ever because sometimes if your parents want something for you, you turn around and you're like, no, I don't want that. You reject it or whatnot. But were you on board the entire time?
Pretty much. But when I got into my teens, I decided I didn't want to follow their exact path. I wanted to get into films and TV. I didn't want to do it live because I'd done it all my life at that point. I'd been traveling as far as I could, traveling with them as far as I could remember back. So, I mean, I've been all over the UK, went to Ireland, Scotland and Wales, and a lot of work in London, but always driving to different places. So I was thinking, no, I'd like to work on films and TV. And at that time there was special effects makeup, but there wasn't actually animatronics. So the job that I wanted hadn't yet really come about. So yeah, I got to a point where I thought, I don't really want to do this live puppetry thing. I want to be more involved in films. So I started making prosthetic makeups and special effects masks and that sort of thing, and some costumes, and trying to see if I could get into the special effects side with little miniatures and models. Because again, the actual job I wanted hadn't yet sort of come about. So although it was not exactly my parents' path, it was still following the puppetry and the creative side, and they supported me in all my crazy endeavors.
Is there any like a traditionalist, like, is there any kind of like a puppetry infighting on the use of kind of technology and animatronics and puppetry, or is it well embraced? I'm sure by this point it's well embraced, but early on?
Yes. Yeah, well, interestingly enough, really the first proper animatronic puppet that was used to perform a character, rather than just a few special effects here and there, was Yoda from The Empire Strikes Back. And I just, by pure chance and luck, got to be part of that team building and then puppeteering Yoda. And they were looking to take all the skills and knowledge that they had with their Stuart Freeborn was the supervisor, amazing guy. He had created the realistic looking apes from 2001 A Space Odyssey in 1968, and they are amazing. I mean, the Stanley Kubrick, difficult man to work for, I believe, wanted the guys with their ape mask on to actually be able to bite into meat, real meat, and tear it off a chop or something. It's like, wow, it's like, that's really tough, because then it's all got to get locked up into the teeth. So the requirements that Stuart had to come up with, and he wanted all the little snarling movements in the lips. It was definitely groundbreaking. And then he used all of that knowledge with working alongside Wendy Midner, who was actually doing some initial development for Dark Crystal for Jim Henson, as she was working on the Yoda body and the Yoda character. So between that, they were putting it all together. And it was like, well, how can we make this character be believable? And because everyone obviously loves the Muppets, they're fantastic. I think everybody does, and I certainly do. But they're stylized, simple puppets, and so it was taking that ability to project a personality through a very simple puppet. Now I wanted to try and do that with a more sophisticated, complex puppet that looked more real. And Yoda was I think the very first successful attempt at that.
For sure. I mean, like there's a personality that like it's still to this day amazes me to see in, you know, the facial features and some of the stuff that you worked on with that puppet. Did I read that it was Mark Hamill that got you involved in the Star Wars universe?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, it was a strange series of events. I was wondering how to get into the film industry, and I decided, well, I'll probably go to university, study sculpture, and try and use that as my way in. But I decided to take a gap year, which was typical in the UK. You would take a year off before you'd start going to university. And so I took a summer job at London's famous toy store called Hamleys of Regent Street. And one lunchtime, while I was out, Mark Hamill came in and bought a whole load of Pelham puppets, which are the little string puppets I had as a kid, for his private collection. And I was devastated because I didn't get to meet him and I didn't get the commission. And I was a massive Star Wars fan, so I was like, oh, no. But they told me, the people who were there who took over for me, that Mark wanted a custom Darth Vader string puppet for his private collection, a carved 18-inch wooden carved marionette version of Darth Vader. And probably about 8 months later, he got back in touch, which surprised me, and commissioned me to build this Darth Vader string puppet. So I did, and he invited me along to Elstree Studios, to which is where they were filming all the stage work, when they've got any sets and they're working in the film stages. That was all done in England. So yeah, he was working at Elstree, and so he invited me along, and I presented the puppet to him, which he was very happy about. And then he introduced me at the end of the day to Stuart Freeborn, the makeup supervisor. And Stuart, a week later, employed me on Yoda.
It's an amazing sequence of events, like and life changing. Like
literally, yeah. And also at Hamleys, I met my future wife, and we've now been married 46 years. So it's like
the most important job ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like it's like I'm just going to be doing just selling some toy puppets, and I lasted about 6 months. I'm not really an indoors sort of shop sort of person. I'm not a 9 to 5. Although when I do work, I'm usually working from about 5 in the morning till 11 at night. So I don't know why I feel I can't do like regular hours. But I guess the fact is that in my entire career, I've had periods where I'm working almost 24/7. And then there'll be some weeks off where I've got complete control over my life. And but there's never a guarantee of any income. So it's been a fascinating 45 years in the movie industry.
It you know, it's before I continue on, I gotta wonder, do we know, does Mark still have that Yoda or Vader puppet?
He does, yes. The last time I saw him a couple of years ago now, Derek Mackey, who is my manager at Cool Waters, he said to Mark, "Oh, Mark, do you still have the puppet that Dave made?" And his wife Mary Lou said, "Yes, we do. It's still in storage. We're going to have to get that out," she said. So,
It's
yeah,
amazing.
so they still have it. So amazing.
It's great. But the sequence of events is just like the happenstance is amazing, but it doesn't happen if you don't have the fundamental, if you don't have the talent and the skill work behind it. And I gotta think having a lifetime of puppetry prepared you to be able to adapt and, I don't want to say show off, but like impress people to be able to take you on like that. I mean, through chance you end up from that makeup job actually as the assistant puppeteer and then taking over in the final week of Yoda, which is an enormous responsibility on something. It's not like it was on the first Star Wars where it was an unproven thing and people were,
Right.
like flying by the seat of their pants or whatnot. This is now the greatest, the greatest series in history at the moment, and probably
Yes.
still is. How do you do you even take time to reconcile that as you're stepping in, or are you just like time to work?
Well, at the time I didn't. At the time it was, well, I mean, when I went for the initial meeting where I got the job, which was a week after I saw Stuart introduced by Mark, went back, and I thought I was going for a different interview. I thought somebody wanted a carved wooden marionette body for one of the toys, and that's what I thought I was going back for. And so, but when they finally said, "Oh, and Stuart would like to employ you in the makeup department," I mean, I was like absolutely floored. I didn't see that one coming at all. I was completely, so when I went in, I was fully confident because I knew I could make this marionette body. But so then he said, "Well, when are you free? When are you available?" I said, "Well, I'm available right now." So he said, "All right, you started yesterday," because it was a Tuesday. So he then took me to the workshop, and I started working in Stuart's lab. That the very time that I had the interview that I didn't even know I was interviewing for. So it was like, so I'm like shell shocked to a degree. And of course, he wants to know what I can do, and so he gives me various different tests. And I was thinking, well, this won't last. I mean, but he did. He found jobs for me. I did them very professionally to the best of my ability at the time, and yeah, and that was my start. I mean, I had made a lot of makeups, costumes, puppets for various different things as a teenager for my own standard 8 cinefilm home movies, because it was before video even. You certainly couldn't do anything on a phone. There were no mobile phones, so it was an old wind up cine camera that I filmed these little home movies. So I had the understanding of what it would take to be able to deliver the work. And of course, I got that from my parents as well. When they had a new show to deliver, they worked very, very hard, worked all around the clock if they had to deliver it. So, yeah, so I had a knowledge and an understanding. And I guess I was just very lucky to be taken on by Stuart and supported.
Yeah, and then that segues into working closely with Frank, and then getting brought into the Henson Company to work on Dark Crystal. When you first heard about the concept of the Dark Crystal, like how mind blowing was it to know that Jim had kind of fashioned this world and it was going to be done entirely through puppetry?
Well, yeah, absolutely, because he'd completely revolutionized puppets for the small screen, for the TV, with Muppets and Sesame Street, and I think he did some slightly more sort of stylized characters on Saturday Night Live in the mid-70s, which were amazing, which were kind of the forerunners of some of the Dark Crystal characters, in my opinion. And so, yes, it was amazing, because here now was an actual whole film that was going to be created based around the job that I was hoping to get, that actually when I first looked for the job didn't exist. So now it existed, and it was going to open up to a lot of people. So I think they had about 500 people on the Dark Crystal crew, initially just starting off with a small group and building up. And I was the first British puppet maker and puppeteer on Dark Crystal in November '79. So, it was an amazing experience because no one had done this before. There was no right or wrong way. And so it was really trying to figure out, taking what we'd learned from Yoda, because there was a lot of great things that were discovered and invented for the creation of Yoda, and some of the Muppet construction techniques were used in Yoda's body and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of crossovers, but it's like, right, now we've got an entire cast to make out of animatronic puppets, and how far can we go with that? And I typically did most of my work for Lyle Conway, and he's a brilliant animatronic effects supervisor, just brilliant. He went on to do Little Shop of Horrors, which I think is still some of the greatest animatronic work, and that still holds up today, and that's all in camera with no computers. So, but yeah, Lyle was in charge of the Skeksis, the Skeks and Aughra, and so I was like his right hand man that did all the work. I sculpted half of the Skeksis' heads. Lyle would sculpt one half, and said, "Oh, you do the other half, David." So then I would use his style of sculpting and sculpt the other side of the Skeksis. So I think it was amazing. I wanted to go to university to improve my sculpture skills, and Lyle showed me in every day at the Jim Henson Creature Shop. So, I mean, talk about sort of getting your wish come true. It's just like unbelievable, really. So, and yeah, again, that was how far do we go with the mechanisms? And I know Lyle and we were really, because Lyle's a great puppeteer as well, and did some work on built some puppets for the Muppet Show, for instance. So he understands all of that. So it was like, right, we've got to make these as light as we possibly can, because it could very easily become too heavy, and you won't be able to get a decent performance if the puppets like they're really too heavy. So I mean, I have over the years operated a few really crazy heavy puppets, and I'm glad we focused on keeping them light on the original Dark Crystal. So yeah, we were inventing all sorts of different things that no one had ever done before.
Speaking of heavy and a lot to work, 6 people, is that how many it took to run Jabba? Because
every once in a while, a couple more. I think when he was smoking, we needed some smoke. One guy was on with a cigar, puffing cigar smoke down a tube for Jabba. Yes, it was an amazing experience with Jabba. We had actually just come off of Dark Crystal, and that had, well, in fact, everybody else had. I didn't. Jim asked myself and Lyle Conway, just the two of us, to stay on after Dark Crystal to do some research and development, and also the promotion for Dark Crystal, because we were going to do exhibits, put some exhibition figure versions of the puppets, put those on display, and we did some presentations and TV shows. So he kept us on to do that. And it was at that point when I was given the call, I received the call from Stuart Freeborn to say he'd like me to be chief puppeteer for Jabba if I'd like. So it was like, literally, it was just offered, would I like to be chief puppeteer for Jabba? So I said, yes, I would. I said, but I'm actually contracted to Jim Henson. And so I asked Jim, and he said, well, as long as I cleared the necessary work for the promotion of Dark Crystal, he would also give me clearance to go and puppeteer Jabba. So I've got my cake and eat it. I'm being employed by world's greatest puppeteer, Jim Henson, at the Creature Shop as one of only 2. And then he releases me to go and do chief puppeteer for Jabba. So it's amazing. So, and so Toby Philpott and I had worked on Dark Crystal together. So, and that was a unique experience because Jim and Frank basically invented how you film these sort of characters, how you go about it, and how the teams of performers come together to bring a single character to life when there are lots of puppeteers. So fortunately, we had that experience, so we were able to pull on that. And so Toby and I were inside Jabba, and then we had outside Bob Keane and John Coppinger using radio control. The servos had just about got good enough by the time we did Jabba. They weren't on Dark Crystal, but they were a few years later. And so Jabba's eyes were servo controlled, and so Bob and John did all of that from outside looking at Jabba, and we were inside. And then Mike Edmonds was on the tail. Sometimes Tim Rose was on the tail. And then lots of sneers, and Mike Osborne often would make his stomach breathe. So we were getting to that level of trying to keep him subtle but alive at all times. But yeah, 6 puppeteers usually.
It's amazing to me because it's an effect, a practical effect that still holds up, and it always makes me curious, like, and I'm sure it has to do with cost or size or maybe I don't know, but like I'll never understand why we've completely abandoned, not completely, but for the most part, in a lot of big budget things, have abandoned practicality, because to me, like, it ages so much better than some of like the rudimentary CG at work.
Yes, I mean, I think that was the thing. I think there are a lot of people really intrigued and loved the advances in CGI animation, and I was one of them. I loved it, and I actually got involved and have done some animation in my time. But I think in some of the mid '90s, the technology wasn't quite there. The detail, the weight. There's still something about CG, unless it's done incredibly well, you kind of know it's not there. And that's the really difficult part. It's very clear that the real practical objects are there. You just kind of know it, just in your soul, just looking at it. There's no necessary sort of tests to prove it, but you just know it's there, and you kind of know that the CG isn't. So I think that's a battle that the animators, the brilliant animators who animate great CGI, have to fight. They have to fight this uphill battle where the puppets automatically are there, and if they're shot properly and they're lit well, then they can look really great. I mean, I did know that right from the start. The lighting is so important. The very same puppet can look terrible if it's badly lit, and it can look fantastic if it's well lit. So the lighting, the whole production team, and again, camera angles and the way it's edited, the whole production can make it work. But again, I suppose these days there's less of that. And
Yeah.
also, most films these days are now assembled in post-production. They film lots and lots of different options, and they work it all out, and they try this and they try that, and they test it. Well, if you wanted to change a shot of Jabba, you'd have to go back to the set, rebuild the set, bring the puppet in. Nowadays, you just can do the animation in post-production, and you can leave that to the last minute. So, and that kind of is one of the expensive parts of, and you can make sure you do it just for the shots that they finally decided upon. So I guess from a production approach, it makes more sense to use computer animation, because if you need to change things, and it seems that that's all they do these days in films,
Yeah.
it's not the old like Stanley Kubrick where he's worked it all out, storyboarded it, and that is the film you see. Now it's all developed by the different producers, and often the studios will have their say and get things changed. So I think the production model is different now, the way a film is made. And so I think it makes it harder for people to use animatronics unless it's a low budget where they are
Yeah.
going to try and just go in, film what they want, and that will get released. So there are some more uses of animatronics, but not in the way that Jabba was, for instance.
Yeah. Well, I always think about, two other projects that you worked on, Roger Rabbit and Back in Action, like the marriage of like using, physicality, things in the physical space, but also using the animation on top of it, I think is another, approach that just seems to, like, now it just seems like, like moving pistols around and stuff like that, you would
Yes.
think, now is almost all going to be done in post, as opposed to like the work you guys did. Like,
Yeah, well, I mean, partly it was the only way to do it at the time, because it was still, even on Roger Rabbit, which we filmed in 1987, it came out the following year. But we had to film everything in camera for real. So there wasn't. They did do some green screen tests, because they did have green screen, and it felt like it really didn't look like it was a part of the shot. Bob Zemeckis, who had directed the film, wanted the best integration between the cartoon characters and the actors, the real world. He wanted the best that we could possibly deliver. So, and that was having real props. He didn't want them cartoons. He wanted the cartoon characters to hold real things. And the only way to make that convincing was to have the real objects in the shot, in the set, while the other actors were acting. And we were basically puppeteering what would look like an Invisible Man film, because they would draw the cartoon characters on top. So it was our job, using puppetry effects and puppetry skills, to move everything that the cartoon characters were holding and were interacting with, so that the real world would have a direct connection to the cartoons who are going to be drawn in later. And again, I think it's that same thing. You instinctively know that this that weasel gun is going across shot with a weasel holding it. You instinctively know that it's actually in the shot, because the way it's reacting to the light, it's all very, very subtle. And they do some pretty good duplicates of that in computer animation these days, but back then that wasn't possible. But even so, there's still something, you just know that gun's in the shot. So therefore, so is the weasel, because the weasel's holding it. So just instinctively, it helps to get the animation to link into the set. And as you say, nowadays, that would be a CGI gun on a cartoon character and wouldn't quite have the same impact, I don't think. But so yeah, having sort of the real objects in set, and we basically worked on every single shot in the film, and we had a core team of 6 puppeteers the whole way through, and we ramped up to 17 for various different days and different sequences. So it was, and that was a department that wasn't originally planned for. So, so we ended up just really extending what was possible and inventing lots of new ways of bringing these objects to life with a personality as well. It wasn't just moving them. Yeah, they had to have the personality of the particular cartoon character that was holding them. So it was like a hybrid performance and special effects rigging, puppeteering job that it was absolutely amazing, and one of my proudest moments in filmmaking.
Yeah, it's incredible, like, and I feel like it's another thing that I always go off on these weird tangents about nowadays, blah 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 blah. But like, I feel like the spirit of collaboration and a community of people working on something, as opposed to, like, it feels like we're getting more insular and kind of trying to do things with less people and do things by ourselves. And I feel like a lot of imagination kind of suffers from that. Like, it's one thing to imagine by yourself, but when you imagine with a crew of people all working towards a common goal, something beautiful is created.
I agree, and I think that was very much the case of the original Star Wars. They had literally the best people at the top of their game, again, from the original film onwards, who were just phenomenal. And they were doing things out of necessity at times, but also they were just really very clever and brilliant filmmakers who used all the tricks that they knew to bring this amazing world to life, and just phenomenal craftsmen and artists. And that's one of the joys of being on a film, is that all this creativity from so many departments. I remember Bob Zemeckis on Roger Rabbit particularly appreciating every single person on the crew, because everybody brought something special to the movie. And he really did. He really was appreciative of everybody on the film. So, and typically that's the case. Jim Henson and Frank Oz were just the same way. So it was just,
Yeah.
it was a magic time of filmmaking, when you had to, because you couldn't fix it in post. So it had to be done there and then.
Yeah. We jumped around, but Labyrinth, they just announced they're going ahead with a sequel. Any chance you might do any work on that, or?
I think it's unlikely. Yeah, I didn't work on the new Dark Crystal series. I was working on another project, so it didn't work out that way. But I think it's probably time for the new generation to step up and try new things. But yeah. it's Labyrinth is a tough one because it to me so much of that was with David Bowie. So he was absolutely delightful human being and made working on the film such a delight, so special. So but I mean, yeah, it's if they get the right script, it could be really good. So
Yeah, I'm a cynic, so and a skeptic. So, but yeah, if you take away Jim Henson and you take away David Bowie, I'm just like you have a long hill to climb there
that's true.
to hit but bare minimum, like
Yeah, that's true. And the interesting thing was back in the day when Labyrinth was released, none of the distributors really wanted to support it because again, it was, I think, ahead of its time. They had a female teenage lead who is the hero. And it's like no one had really done that before. And it had all these fantastical creatures. And it was just like, oh, wow, okay. So this doesn't fit in any of the boxes we used to. So it didn't do well initially because I guess the old men that were running the business didn't feel that it was a film for them, which it probably wasn't ever intended to be. But for the audience that it was, they absolutely adored it, and kids who grew up with it these days, they would absolutely say. Some of them have said to me directly, "It literally saved my life. It changed my life around." So it's like, wow, it made a huge impact on people's lives, and so it's a tough act to follow, and so let's hope. I mean, and for me, it's always down to the script. It's always the script. If it's in the script, then you're good to go. It can get better or worse depending on whether someone messes with the script. But if you've got a poor script, then it's never going to be right. So,
sure.
so that's hopefully it's been, many years, 40 years. So it's and also the probably the market's different. People want a slightly different film. If they did an exact copy style-wise of Labyrinth, maybe that wouldn't be so popular. So there's a lot of challenges to bring that to life, but I wish them well in doing so.
Yeah, it's one of the things that like it was always a favorite of mine growing up, but I never really acknowledged how important it is that you kind of touched upon it, that there's a female lead who defiantly tells kind of the male, you have no power over me. Like
Yeah.
and it's amazing to look back on a moment like that.
Yeah, I mean, so I think it really was ahead of its time, and but that was Jim. He always was. Everything he did, he was always thinking years ahead of everybody else. I mean, he came up with in I remember chatting to him in around about 1981, real-time digital puppetry, CGI puppetry back then, and it's like it. And he had an idea for a show where they would start off with puppets that looked like animation, and then when the technology got good enough, they'd switch it for real-time digital puppets. And of course, it took decades more until the technology was actually caught up with Jim's vision. So, so he was ahead in his thinking about pretty much everything, I think. So.
Well, it's a perfect segue to the other thing I wanted to talk about, which is the Outabody, which to me is an amazing thing. Like, because I don't know that I ever, even though like digital models in CG are, obviously models that are figured, like to work them like puppets and like marionettes, like it makes sense, but I don't know why. Like, it never like clicked in my head as something. What was like? I guess what was the first thing that you used that on to or what project that kind of was the birth of that?
Well, I mean, it's been an ongoing thing. I think initially we all the British puppeteers worked on Little Shop of Horrors, and myself and Mike Quinn, we were good friends. We worked on the upper lip and the lower lips of the supper time plant, and it's and I was thinking, well, wouldn't it be great? Because we would do like 25 takes to try and get the lip sync just right. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be great if we could record that? We could do it in rehearsal. And then when we get to film, we could play that back. And my friend David McCall he worked on Baron Munchausen with me, which was a Terry Gilliam film, amazing. And he built a special onboard customized computer for controlling servo motors on the dancing figure of Baron Munchausen, which was on wires. And so his feet were naturally doing this dance motion. And this was a computer controlled servo rig. So I asked him, well, can we build a computer control system where we can record servo motors? And he said, yes, you can, because he'd just done I think it was a full motion control system for Superman 4. So he built it from the ground up rather than going and renting one of the very expensive ones. They had so much to do. They built their own, and David built it, and it worked perfectly. So he had, again, basically all the basic knowledge. So he created a control system for us, and he started in 1990, and he delivered it in 1991. And of course, there's like, right, okay, well, I don't want to do just joysticks like Outabody joysticks on a radio control box. I want to be able to puppeteer it. So I created my first Puppeteer glove in 1991 for a high definition project, which again at the time was like high definition. It was unheard of in 1991. So we went to Switzerland to film this test with an animatronic character, and I used the glove to control the face and the lip sync. And then that basically evolved over 10 years until it's like, right, now I need to create a whole series of these Outabody gloves. And I worked with Steve Rosenbluth, who had created an animatronic control system for his own company, Concept Overdrive. And so I was able to use that because it's really amazing. He was using it for cable cam for all the system was running all the cameras when you go and see a football match. And so it was used in many different things, but of course it was also suitable for puppetry and animatronics. So with him and Glenn Silver, who from Technology Playgroup, created an interface box, so all my gloves could go through the sensor box from Technology Playgroup and connect to Overdrive, and then we could mix and control and record servo motors like never before. So it opened up a whole new area of designing, because now I can use the computer to mix different parts of servos at different times to make more complicated and more realistic expressions. So it opened up this whole new world of design and engineering.
It's a long way from Punch and Judy, isn't it?
It's a long way from Punch and Judy, yeah. And for me, it's all self-taught.
Yeah.
So some of it I just can't do. That's why it's Steve Rosenbluth and Glenn Silver. They'll fill in the gaps. But I do quite a bit of it myself. I've grown up to like to be a jack of all trades and try and do everything. So yeah, when we're building puppets, I'll do the sculpts, I'll do the molds, I'll do the foam latex cast, I'll do the fiberglass skull, I'll do all the engineering, all the mechanisms, and then finish it all off, paint it up, make costumes, and then puppeteer it. So it's kind of like going back to what my parents did with their shows, because there was just the two of them doing all that. So I've kind of enjoyed being one of the people who can do all of that and see the project from the very beginning concept through to the final delivery.
Speaking from the beginning all the way through, you got the memoir coming out. It comes out this month. What was the process of putting that together? Did it unearth anything that you kind of, now that you're looking at it as a big picture, as a part of, instead of just living it, what did it awaken, I guess?
Well, the thing that it most illuminated was the fact how lucky I was in all the initial things. I mean, I know I was like passionate about doing the work that I did, but some of the events that happened and the coincidences and the luck and being at the right time, the right place at the right time. But then just back in the day, just taking it all for granted, because as you say, you're living it, and it's just like, oh, okay. Sometimes there's not even time to think about it. You just have to move on and deal with the situation. But looking back, wow, I can't believe how incredibly lucky I've been. And I've also been able to work with really wonderful people. There's really no misery in working in the films that I've worked on. Some people have said that they worked on films that have been, oh, it's terrible, I hated it and everything. but no, I've been lucky, and all the actors that I've worked with have been fantastic. And so looking back on it, it was like, okay, well, how am I going to? There's so many stories. There's so much. It's like, what do I put down? How do I write this thing? Because a good friend of mine about 20 years ago said, "Oh, David, you've got to write it down because if you don't, no one else will." I said, "All right, okay, thank you, Murty." So I eventually finally got round to doing it. But the hook is that I decided I was looking through photographs to put in it. And of course, you've got to get them all approved and pay license fees from all the companies. And I was thinking, well, what should I put in there? And the more I looked into them, and I thought, oh, well, this photo explains this story really well, and this photo explains that story. So I decided, instead of just putting a handful of pictures in the middle spine like everyone else does, I decided to go about the very expensive and difficult way by actually filling it with images from my life, from my movie career. And so, yeah, it's just absolutely stuffed with films and projects. And so it's because my life is very much a creative visual world. I thought my book should be the same thing, so that you can actually see what I'm talking about when I'm talking about it.
That's amazing. I can't wait to get my hands on it because, like, I've been talking. I have another show with a friend of mine where we do music discovery. And one of the things I talked about, every week we bring a new song and an old song for the audience to check out.
Excellent.
And a few weeks ago, I brought working in the Star Wars universe. Did you ever meet Pete Kleinow, Sneaky Pete?
I did not, unfortunately, no.
He
I met Ben Burt, who is doing the sound design stuff, but didn't meet Sneaky Pete. No.
Sneaky Pete was the pedal steel guitar player for like the Byrds at one point.
Right.
Graham Parsons, Flying Burrito Brothers, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But he was also a stop motion animator on the Star Wars films, as well as Terminator and stuff like that. And I got into a conversation about guys like Pete and like yourself, you know, people who have played a part in every important thing, you know, in what makes me who I am today, who I feel like deserve to have a light shine on them because, you know, you're as important as Jim Henson, as George Lucas, as like to be able to make those visions come to life. It takes people like yourself to be able to make these things. So I'm like super excited to be able to dive into this book to better understand, you know, the inner goings of the things that I love.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the reasons for doing it. And also, again, my friend Murty said, and also then your granddaughters will be able to know what you've done and when they're older. So it's like, yeah, that's true. It's good to get a record and a history of it, because it was I think a unique period. I mean, again, for lots of my friends, Toby and Rob Tigner and all those people who started off back in the early 80s, we had a wonderful run in movies before pretty much it's been taken over by CG. But then puppeteers are still working. There still is work out there, still is animatronics. So yeah, it's a lovely career. It's something that I am so glad I was able to do.
Speaking of CG and that pivot, tell the audience a little bit about Mauldrix. What's going on there?
Yes, well, Mauldrix was based on one of my parents' puppet plays called The Ice King, and Mauldrix is the servant to the Ice King, and so I wanted to make this. Take their original puppet play and make it into a screen version from the time I was a teenager. And I kept talking about it, and I thought I'll never do it. And then eventually, about 15 years ago, I thought, no, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. So, and I started off planning to do all the close-up shots and mid shots with animatronic puppets, and then use computer animation for the wide shots. Because again, I was looking to see if I could get some funding. Two producer friends of mine said, yeah, they would look for it. But when we started, it was just after the 2008 financial crash, and there was no money for independent animated films anywhere. So it all changed. If I'd done it a couple of years later, a couple of years earlier, probably could have easily picked up the funds for it. But then anyway, so I ended up trying to do the whole thing myself using my own funds. And so I moved to motion capture because I wanted to use my puppeteer friends and bodysuit performers. Misha Sisti, for instance, was Michelangelo in the Ninja Turtle movies. And so he's a brilliant puppeteer and body performer. And so he performed characters. And so we motion captured the whole film. And that is a computer animated film that's but it's all performed. So so the facial animation, I stuck dots on my face to do all the different expressions and dialogue. So again, it's a hybrid. It's not really like any animation film you've seen before. So it has a bit more of a feeling of the old animatronics. But I finally completed the film to the best of my ability with basically no money.
It's incredible. You know, I watched the trailer, and I got to say, it's fun. You know, I didn't know that it was mocap, but like now knowing that makes so much more sense, because I feel like the character movement is something, you know, like even on a smaller budget, like there's movement that you don't see on like enormous budgeted animated films right now. Like I just feel like little nuances and little tweaks, and knowing that, like, you know, it was put together by puppeteer friends and whatnot, like it also makes so much more sense to me, you know, because it's the kind of things that I've always been attracted to and attached to with the physical puppets. So
well, excellent. Yeah, I mean, that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to do something slightly different, but of course, when initially I was trying to see if I could get it distributed, everyone's saying, well, it doesn't look like Shrek. And it's like, well, no, it's not meant to. So, oh, well, no, we don't want it then. So, okay. So again, kind of a little bit like when you try to do something different, it doesn't fit in the same box. Then, so maybe one day I'll be able to get it distributed. So, but yeah, for me, it was really a homage to my parents, to thank them for everything. And my dad's voice is in it as the Ice King, and my mum's voice is in it as Marshy, and I'm playing a character called Callus. And so yeah, it's a family sort of almost home movie, but using motion capture.
it's incredible. It's like a full circle moment. I really love that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
One of the other things I did want to mention, and then we'll jump into the questionnaire that I close things with, but is your work on rides as well. And the reason I mention that is because I know Brian Lynch, who wrote A Secret Life of Pets,
Yes.
and also, you know, wrote the script for the ride, and see, you know, knowing that we have this connection of because you worked on that ride, correct?
I did, yes. Yes, I mean, the catch with all of these is that you're under a non-disclosure agreement with Universal and with Disney for the different rides I've done. I worked for my very good friend Lee Romer, and he's a brilliant sculptor and artist, and we've worked together for 20 years. And so it was his company that got some work on various different projects that I've worked on. And yes, that was great fun. It was lovely going along and seeing the final ride. But one of the crazy things was, of course, it was just before COVID.
Yeah.
So we were working on it, and people were turning up wearing all the face masks, and going, why are people wearing face masks? And then suddenly COVID hit. So
Oh, geez.
yeah, no, it's a great ride. So it was a really good experience for me. So, but unfortunately, I can't really talk about any of the details because I'm
Sure.
under a strict non-disclosure. So I'm sorry about that. So
Completely understand. No, it's cool, super cool. So this questionnaire that I end things with, it's called the Jawntlet. These are just it's my stock questions that I ask all of my guests. It starts with the one hit wonder in name only. You're just picking a favorite. The first one, Billy Joel or Elton John? Who do you prefer?
Elton John or Billy Joel? I would say Elton John. just swinging to the British side.
Yeah, it makes sense. You got to take care of your own. I get it.
But it's just that, yeah, I was introduced to Elton before Billy Joel because of being in Britain, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and all of those albums. Yeah. So yeah, I listened to that as a young teenager. So yeah, I would say, yeah.
Excellent. The next one, Debbie Harry or Joan Jett?
Debbie Harry.
Yeah.
Again, British scene, Blondie. That was my era really in music, and just coming out of the punk scene in London in the 70s. So yeah. So yeah, had a few Blondie albums, and again, British side, of course. So
Aretha Franklin or Tina Turner?
Aretha Franklin. I love them both, but the Queen of Soul is just phenomenal.
Absolutely. Nirvana or Pearl Jam?
Nirvana or Pearl Jam, yes. That's a good question. I would say probably Pearl Jam.
Okay, that's my point. That's my pick as well. See, we're Janis Joplin or Stevie Nicks?
Ooh, that's a tough one because they are like equal in my mind pretty much. I would only say Stevie Nicks because I love some of her songwriting as well, and yeah, I love that. So I'd probably, although Janis Joplin is brilliant. So now if I had to, I'd probably go Stevie Nicks.
Good answer. There's no wrong answers to these.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong.
Yeah.
The big cliche, the Beatles or the Stones?
Beatles.
Yeah.
Beatles.
I get it.
I mean, they're both British, but now I just love the development and experimentation and chord structures of the Beatles. I mean, some of John Lennon's early just guitar stuff that's like out of this world. And so just you've got a guitar in the background. So yeah, I was in the band for a very short time, but just looking into all of that is just, yeah. So for me, it's definitely got to be the Beatles.
That's awesome. When you were in a band, what'd you play?
I was the drummer.
Oh, fantastic. Actually, that kind of makes sense. I can kind of see it kind of goes along with puppetry. You're using multiple limbs at different, I get it.
So yeah, and I've messed around on the guitar, but I'm about the same level today as I was when I was messing around as a teenager because I've never spent enough time to improve. So
fantastic. The last one of the one-hit wonders: Bohemian Rhapsody or Stairway to Heaven?
Oh, well, we used to play Stairway, and I can actually play it on the guitar. And I love Queen, love Bo Rap. Wow, that's really tough. That is really tough. What would my younger self would do Stairway, and my older self would do Bo Rap. So I think I'm gonna have to go Bohemian Rhapsody for today. So
okay, I like it. I like that. I like giving a nod to the younger self, but also acknowledging the older. The second half of this is the top 10 countdown. In this, the word Jawn is Philly slang for anything you want it to be. A friend of mine once said that Philadelphians use the word Jawn like Smurfs use the word Smurf. So it can be anything you want it to be. So it starts with the first Jawn. What was the first thing you were obsessed with when you were a kid?
The first thing I was obsessed with, 101 Dalmatians. I read the book and absolutely adored it. And we had a local library, and I took it out, I think, 20 times from the library constantly. And I read it cover to cover, then kept reading it, and then had to take it back and brought it out again. I absolutely loved that book. And it was, so that was the first thing that I really became obsessed about.
That's incredible. You just completely awoken a memory in my own brain of taking the same book out of the library over and over again. Because for me, it was Shel Silverstein's A Light in the Attic.
Right.
which like actually all of the Shel Silverstein, where the sidewalk ends and whatnot. But yeah, that's such a perfect childhood memory of just like I remember my parents being like, "Don't you want to read anything else?" And I was like, "No, I'm good here."
No, I like this one. All right, okay.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I just want to stay in this world. I guess that was it. I wanted to stay in
That's
that
it.
world. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Number two, what's your current job? What are you into right now?
Oh, what am I into now? That's a very good question. I guess I'm into sort of decorating and just making my house look better. Um, my grandfather was what was called a grainer and marbler. So he would actually do fake graining and fake marbling for often for British pubs. If they wanted to have it and make it look like it was a walnuts pub where it would just be regular wood and he'd paint it. He was probably London's best. And so there was a certain amount of construction work that he, and in fact, my father and my uncle did when they were young men that I got to observe. So I have a basic understanding of a lot of that stuff and carpentry. So that keeps me interested. It's still being physical, and what it does, it also triggers some of that creative side. I haven't really built any puppets recently, but I probably will soon.
It's awesome. Great answer. Number three, what was your first concert? What was the first live show you ever saw?
First live show. That's a good question. I think it was the Jacksons.
Really?
Yes. Michael Jackson and his brothers just after just because they moved to the Epic label and called themselves the Jacksons. I think that was the first concert I went to.
Fantastic. I always mention this, but now there's a certain importance to mentioning it now. My first concert and my second concert, they were both David Bowie. So
Wow. Yes. No, I never saw him. Never saw him
no,
with him, and a couple of times.
yeah,
But yeah, I didn't actually get to see one of his shows.
that's crazy. That's wild. Number four, what was the last live show you saw?
Last live show, Nick Kershaw in London.
Nice.
British sardonic pop guy who always write. I just love his lyrics. They're just very British.
Oh, I love it. I'll have to check some out. Number five, what was your favorite concert? Best live show you ever saw?
Ooh, favorite concert. Ooh. Let's think. Wow. I think it was probably Sting at the Royal Albert Hall in London, many years ago now. Seen him a few times, and my one of my things is I had tickets for Led Zeppelin, which ended up being their very last ever British concert before John Bonham died, and I couldn't go because I was working on The Empire Strikes Back. So so I had tickets to go and see Led Zeppelin, and I never saw them in the end because then that was it. I thought, oh well, I'm working on Empire. There'll be loads more Zepp concerts, so So that was
Wow, that's incredible. Like it's like one of those like, ah, damn, but then also you're working on Empire, so like it's like yeah, it weighs out, I guess.
yeah.
Number six, who have you never seen live that you wish you could have? They can be living or dead.
Oh, that is David. Well, yeah, I would say I'd like to see David Bowie, and I would like to have seen Queen as well, and obviously, quite a few, quite a few. And again, I was always working. I mean, we got to see um, Fleetwood Mac doing the Rumours, the original Rumours tour, and saw Stevie Wonder, saw Diana Ross, saw Michael Jackson alone as well when he did his tours. But yeah, most of the time it's like, and I saw Steely Dan, which was brilliant. I loved Steely Dan. So, but yeah, most of them. I was always too busy working 24/7, guys. So I missed I didn't see any Beatles, of course, because I was too young, but I would have liked to have seen them.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Number seven, name an unappreciated Jawn, something you wish people paid more attention to.
Ah, um, That's a really interesting question. Something that's interested. Well, it sounds a bit. I mean, I love it when people appreciate puppetry. But that's a little bit too on the nose, isn't it? It's like, yeah, it's what I do, so you should like the things that I do. I think following your passion. I think that's a that's what I did as far as my career. And when I've met people who have done it, they've just really enjoyed their lives. And I think it's never too late to do that. I think it's always good to so enjoy what you want. And then the other is reading, just reading a book. I just love reading. So and that's become less popular these days because everyone's on the phone, you know. So
Yeah, beautiful answers, both of them. Number 8, what's your favorite album?
ooh, wow. Well, that has changed so many times. Wow, favorite album. Huh, that is tough. Yeah, so it's. I mean, recently I love lots of the Elbow. They're brilliant. But I mean, I think probably I've got to go back to my younger days. Um, Probably the album that hit me the most and I enjoyed the most when it came out would have been Thriller, I think, with Michael Jackson. I
It's
think
an
so.
incredible album, isn't it?
It
Like,
really is an incredible album. Yeah, I mean, I love pretty much anything in the Beatles as well, but um, something that actually came out and yeah, just the events that was Thriller, and then of course
yeah,
the John Landis video changed the world with that as well. So yeah, it's I've got hundreds that would be in there, but that's the one I'm going to settle on today.
I like it. I like it. Number 9, name an artist whose output you'll consume anything they release.
Ah, interesting. Well, I'd say again Nick Kershaw because I again I love his stuff. Um, Also Elbow, I love them too. Both British. Yeah, so I'd yeah, those guys.
Perfect. And number 10, the last and final one. What is your favorite Jawn of all time? Can be anything you want it to be.
Famous anything of all time. No, that's an interesting one. It's my favorite of all time. Favorite John of all time. Again, there's different parts in different eras. When I was a teenager, it would have most certainly been Planet of the Apes, the book and the movies and everything. It inspired me so much. I loved the the narrative, the storytelling, the style of filmmaking. That was amazing. And that was then later replaced by Star Wars. And so Star Wars and that original trilogy, and that I so luckily became part of. So yeah, so I think it would be films. That would be the overall thing. It would be the feature films, and I because I love watch them and I love being involved in them, and just one of my most delightful day-to-day experiences even now is if I'm working and I walk onto a sound stage where they do the filming. Just walking onto a sound stage gives me great joy.
It's a brilliant and beautiful answer. So the memoir, My Life with Animatronics, Movies, Puppets, and Beyond, is it out now or is it
It
coming out?
is, yes, yes. It's there's a special pre-order with I think Derek's arranged it to have a poster from Mauldrix that I'll sign, as well as I can sign the book, and also there's an 8x10 Star Wars photograph that I will sign too. So it's a very good deal. So he's put together a special deal for like the pre-release. Eventually, I think it will. Well, it's being printed through Barnes and Noble, but at the moment we're just doing it through Derek, so I can sign them. If you bought it directly from Barnes and Noble, I wouldn't be able to sign it. So by doing it through Cool Waters, then I can sign it. And I think soon we'll be putting up just the book rather than the deal through Cool Waters, so you can buy just the book if you want just the book rather than the package. So, but yeah, that's probably the best way to get it for now, unless you get to come along and see me at one of the conventions that Derek's arranged for me this year. So again, you can look through, I think, coolwatersprods.com and see which conventions are coming up this year. And I would certainly be having copies of my book when I go to those.
We'll have links to that in the show notes. So anyone who would like to purchase the book, and I implore you to, because what an amazing life Dave has lived. And just like I said, has had his hands involved with so much that is in the framework of pop culture throughout my entire life. And I am so honored that you came on the show today to talk to me.
Well, thank you. It's been an absolutely delightful interview. Thank you very much. It's been brilliant. And some really interesting questions, some that almost stumped me.